Stephen King, one of the greatest horror authors of all time, not only for his incredible world building, memorable character writing, but also for those villains that happen to transcend the medium and into pop culture itself. Hey everyone, I'm Nikhil with Shelf Esteem, and these are my top 10 favorite Stephen King villains. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Nikhil with Shelf Esteem. I'm a composer, now also a booktuber. You can find my music in The Wheel of Time Season 2 and 3, His Dark Materials Season 3, and the newly released The Hills of Tenchiko, the featured musical number in The Wheel of Time Season 3, Episode 6. So I wanted to talk about my favorite author of all time, Stephen King. As you could tell from the shelf back here, I have a whole shelf dedicated just to his works. I'm about 50-something books deep so far in his catalog. I'm looking forward to finishing his bibliography. One thing that has always struck me about Stephen King is his ability to transcend genre itself. Whether it's series like The Dark Tower, where it could be a genre mashup that defies the term genre itself, or just the ability to write in multiple genres. However, he kind of got his start in horror, didn't he? He's known as the king of horror. So for good reason. I think there's a part of it that is his ability to create memorable worlds and characters is kind of second to none. He is such a great character writer in the horror genre, and a lot of authors try to imitate but never quite get there. The second part is, you think about any of his villains, they have transcended through partially through his iconic villains, but also their adaptations. Whether it be It, Carrie, Pet Sematary, Cujo, the list goes on. There's so many villains that it was actually hard to choose a top 10 list, but I tried anyways. I'll give you a couple honorable mentions before I start, and just remember, these are my top 10. You're going to have a different top 10, and I would invite you after this video, please leave it in the comments. Let me know what your top 10 Stephen King villains would be. If you like this kind of video, please like and subscribe. And now on to the honorable mentions. So the first one I want to mention is kind of a villain, but not really a villain at the same time. And that is Cujo. Now Cujo is that lovable Saint Bernard in the book Cujo that goes crazy and has rabies. Now the reason why I made him an honorable mention is he is terrifying throughout the Cujo book. And, you know, Cujo has now kind of gotten synonymous with that kind of monstrous dog vibe. However, he was also a victim at the same time. He had rabies. He was known as a lovable family pet. So to call him a villain is a little bit of a stretch, but man, is he terrifying. If you haven't checked that book out, you got to check it out. The next honorable mention I want to mention is one that doesn't quite take the main story, but is a huge part of Carrie White's problems, and that is her mom, Margaret White. From her overzealous religious extremism to her mental, emotional, and physical abuse that she puts on her daughter, Carrie White, it's instrumental, really, in a lot of what happens to her later on in the book. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but you might already know kind of the story and how it goes. But, you know, this mom is terrifying. She's terrifying in the movie, she's terrifying in the book. And I think it's because she's grounded in humanity. You know, it's like what happens when the mind starts to warp and become unchecked. You know, it's as much mental illness as it is, you know, going into religious extremism. A lot of themes are explored here, but again, she's not quite the central focus point of the book. Of course, the focus point is about her daughter Carrie, so I put her as an honorable mention. But man, is she terrifying. Let's go to number 10. So this one is very interesting because a lot of people draw parallels to what is going on in the current political climate, at least in the US. And that is Greg Stilson, the antagonist of The Dead Zone. Now, The Dead Zone is a phenomenal book and very underrated, I think, in King's catalog. Basically about a guy who wakes up from the coma and he seems to have this ability to see events before they've even happened yet. Now, Greg Stilson often gets parallels to certain political people in right now in our political sphere in the US, and the idea that, like, if you could stop someone like that before they became what they become, would you do it? You know, it's like this idea is very interesting. But man, the first scene of how Greg Stilson is introduced is pretty harrowing. You kind of already see what he's going to be like in the rest of the book. So that's my number 10. Number 9 I want to mention is kind of a little bit off the beaten path, and some of these recommendations, kind of some of my thoughts, my picks are going to be a little bit off center because I want to have some that might surprise you, but that also terrified me. And that would be The Policeman from The Library Policeman. Now, not only is he terrifying from the supernatural construct of which he is, which is kind of a manifestation of this kid's thoughts and his traumatic memories. The amount of kind of trigger warnings I would say about this book is probably one of the higher ones in Stephen King's catalog. I mean, there's a lot of allusions to like sexual abuse and assault and stuff like that in here that is really hard to read. It's a very hard book to read, but it is definitely one of King's more underrated ones, I think. And The Policeman is terrifying both in his physical manifestation and also kind of what he implies as a repressed memory for this main character. So that's my number 9. Number 8 I want to mention is the one that made vampires truly terrifying, and that is Kurt Barlow from Salem's Lot. Now, Salem's Lot is a phenomenal book if you haven't read it yet. Came out in 1975, I believe, and it has been instrumental in making vampires terrifying in the cultural lexicon, both in the book and the subsequent adaptations. But really what makes Kurt Barlow terrifying is he's as old as time itself, and there's a timeless, calculating, ancient quality to him, and kind of how he's set upon this town, and really how he kind of sickens the town. This is a theme that becomes very widely used in King's novels, is the whole town itself getting afflicted by something. So I would say Kurt Barlow is pretty terrifying. If you haven't checked it out and you want a vampire story that makes you feel like, oh, this is the vampires of classic times, it really is influenced by a lot of the classic Bram Stoker's Dracula. You could see Mary Shelley's Frankenstein in this, but there's more of the classic horror scares that made Stephen King so great. Is number 8 choice, which is Kurt Barlow from Salem's Lot. Number 7 might be a little surprise to some of you, and that is the antagonist of the Mr. Mercedes crime fiction trilogy, Brady Hartsfeld. Now, he wasn't the sole focal point of the antagonists in the whole series, but he had a huge role to play, and he kind of opens up the book of the first book, Mr. Mercedes. You get an idea of what you're in for, and this is not a spoiler because you read it on the back flap, but a guy goes through a line of people and like just mows them down with his Mercedes, and that's kind of where the book picks up. Brady Hartsfeld is not only scary in his quick-wittedness, the game of cat and mouse that he plays with one of the detectives, how he seems to be a couple steps ahead of people at every turn, but also kind of the abuse that he has dealt with in his own family is pretty hard to read. So there's a lot of difficult reading in that, the character that makes up, Brady Hartsfeld's psyche, as well as kind of his various appearances in the series. I mean, I think he is definitely one that starts with a bang, and you kind of already know what you're in for. So that's my number 7 pick, Brady Hartsfeld. Let me know if you read Mr. Mercedes, and if you haven't, and you want to check out some of Stephen King's crime fiction, that might be a really good place to start. Number 6 is another one that's slightly off the beaten path, and that is from one of my favorite series, The Dark Tower. And no, it's not the one you're thinking. It's actually from Book 3, The Wastelands. And I would say that would be Blaine the Mono. A talking train? Doesn't sound that scary. Oh man, does Stephen King find a way to make it a twisted fever dream. It really feels like an acid trip through fantasy. And the thing that makes Blaine the Mono so scary to me is, again, his mind, his intellect. He's so calculating. He's several steps ahead of the main characters at every turn. And basically, the characters have nowhere to run. This is the way to get them closer to their goals, but it's also possibly a death-defying end for them if they kind of step one way wrong. So really, really great, interesting villain. I've never seen anything quite like it, and it's really what cemented for me that Stephen King is one of the most bizarre horror authors, and that's part of why we love him, right? So that is number 6, Blaine the Mono. Let me know if you've read the Dark Tower series in the comments as well. I'd love to hear what you think about that if you haven't. Number 5 is one of my recent reads and one that I really enjoyed. That is a book called Needful Things. Very criminally underrated. If you haven't checked it out, highly recommend this one. And it's basically about a store run by a guy named Leland Gaunt, seemingly a normal guy. Store that pops up in the middle of Castle Rock, seemingly overnight, that seems to have just what you're looking for, as long as you do him a favor or two. Now, those favors start off as being almost like innocent, and they just start to devolve into depravity. And this Leland Gaunt as an antagonist is probably one of the more terrifying Stephen King villains that doesn't get the credit he quite deserves, because he's not like a typical iconic look to him, like, you know, a Pennywise the Clown or something like that. But man, in my opinion, he's up there with one of the scariest Stephen King villains. And, you know, the town is completely, again, afflicted by this whole thing. It's very involved. The interesting thing is you see, you know, dozens of characters interacting with Leland Gaunt over the course of the book. And each interaction feels very meaningful, purposeful, and very unique, distinct. And that's because, of course, of Stephen King's writing, but also the way the villain plays upon these people's kind of psyches and their weaknesses. Really interesting, parasitic kind of villain. So if you haven't checked out Needful Things, definitely check it out. That is number 5. Number 4 might be one that you would be expecting to see on this list. Here's Johnny. You know who I'm talking about. Jack Torrance from The Shining. So this was Stephen King's third published novel. And it was interesting too because, you know, the adaptation by Stanley Kubrick paints him with that Jack Nicholson brush. So he kind of always seems a little unhinged. But the book was interesting because he starts off as a much more normal, seemingly everyday family man. And seeing him devolve into this kind of craziness. I'm trying not to spoil anything because I don't want to spoil the book for you itself, but you know, this is at least enough in pop culture lexicon that you kind of know the idea of it. You know, Overlook Hotel, people are there to be caretakers over the winter, completely isolated from other people. And what happens, you know? Is it the mind that is losing itself? Is the hotel haunted? What is actually going on here? So really interesting. But I love that juxtaposition. A seemingly ordinary guy. That means that no one is safe, you know? And that gets to be really scary. I love the adaptation, of course. I think Jack Nicholson made that character even scarier, in my opinion. However, the juxtaposition between normal guy becomes this crazed person. That's pretty scary. So that would be my number 4. Number 3 is one of the most iconic Stephen King villains, in my opinion. One that I think a lot of people would see pretty high up on this list, and that is Annie Wilkes, expertly played by Kathy Bates in the book Misery. Now, you all know that one scene. Oh man, it is even more disgustingly disturbing in the book. If you've watched the movie, you haven't read the book, check it out. I understand why they made a few changes to that particular scene, but there's something about fan zealousness, you know, fan obsession that can be equally terrifying. A writer who's on the road with his last novel in hand, you know, bringing it to his publisher in the middle of a snowstorm, gets in a car wreck, wakes up in an unfamiliar house. Oh, thank goodness. His number 1 fan is there to take care of him. But is he being taken care of, or is he being taken care of? You know what I'm saying? Annie Wilkes is a phenomenal villain because, again, mental illness is part of it, but then it's also fan obsession. It's like, how much agency do fans have over a writer's writing? How much can fans, you know, basically make an author feel captive in their own stories, you know? And this is kind of a physical manifestation of that. But man, she's terrifying, and she's equally terrifying, if not more so, in the film. So if you haven't checked it out, definitely check out Misery, both the book and the film. Do a side-by-side. I would be curious to hear what you think about both of those. So now we're getting to the top 2 choices. These 2 might be familiar to you. One might be a little bit of a surprise. But I want to say, before I get to those, if you like this kind of video, I would so appreciate you liking, subscribing, and joining our community. We have a Discord of 84 members linked down below. We also have some other handy links down for you. Lots of ways you can support the channel, but the easiest, most low friction way would you be to subscribe and hit the notification bell so the right people could see this video. So let's get on to the number 2 choice. Number 2 is one that has appeared in several Stephen King novels. From The Stand to The Dark Tower itself, the Man in Black, Randall Flagg. Now, the first line of the Dark Tower series that starts it off, one of the first things that Stephen King ever wrote, but actually got published as a novel in 1982, The Gunslinger. The man in black fled across the desert, and the gunslinger followed. What a line. One of the most iconic lines in the history of novels, in my opinion. It is the best of times, it is the worst of times. It's right up there with The Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, you know. I think the interesting thing about this villain is how much larger than life he seems, both in the Dark Tower and the subsequent other places he appears. He is a foil for many characters, and he is all pervasive, and you almost feel like tracking him down might be able to give you the keys to all of Stephen King's work. It is phenomenal how he's been able to not only write a character that seems compelling because he's enigmatic. You don't quite know his psyche, you don't quite know his reason for being there, except to create havoc. He's kind of the devil on your shoulder, you know. But then also, you know, the fact that he's larger than life in various novels. So my number 2 pick would be Randall Flagg, the Man in Black himself. Number 1 should come as no surprise for all of you, because this is probably his most famous Stephen King villain, one might argue, and that is Pennywise the Clown from It. Now, It came out in 1986 and has made clowns terrifying for generations the world over. And of course, Pennywise is displayed often as a clown because he goes after kids. He preys on them. And but he's really an entity. Why do they call him It? He's a faceless, shapeless, formless entity that takes the the form of a fear. And he preys upon kids. But again, this is the whole idea of Derry, Maine being afflicted by something that transcends generations. You know, how old is this thing? Is it as old as time itself? Is it a manifestation of what compels us to our baser instincts, possibly? What I love about It is it's the juxtaposition again. It's the supernatural entity. It's also the evil that humans do to each other. But it's all, the crown jewel is really Pennywise the Clown there. It. If you haven't seen the adaptations, they're fantastic. The Tim Curry one is a little hokey, but it's fun in its own right. And it is, you know, he does a great job playing Pennywise. The 2017 adaptation, at least chapter 1, I thought was fantastic. This is the adaptation played by Bill Skarsgård, who has that kind of evil smile mixed with the childlike innocence in his eyes. The perfect way to connect with kids and lure them to his lair. We all float there too, right? So if you haven't checked out It, what are you guys waiting for? I'm telling you, this book is a masterpiece, and it's in no small part due to this iconic Stephen King villain. So what did you think of this list? Did you like it? There's so many other ones that I wanted to put in here, but we only had time for top 10. Maybe as I finish his works, I'll do an updated list, but I'd love to know from you. What did you think? Any other ones you would want to add? And I'm leaving a playlist down here of other Stephen King content in case you want to check out more, either book reviews or also things about Stephen King's scariest stories, their non-scariest stories, maybe a little Dark Tower overview and a ranking. Check that out in this description here and down below. I'm Nikhil with Shelf Esteem. Thank you for being here. For those of you who are new, welcome to the channel. I hope you enjoy, get to peruse around, hit that like, subscribe, notification bell. Be good to yourselves and be good to each other. And as always, I will see you on the next video. Take care.